beyond Harborside, where all of the new office buildings are at Exchange Place, that was the Pennsylvania Railroad's original terminal. And for years, that was the terminal of their suburban passenger trains, which gradually were moved into Penn Station, New York. Pennsy had a ferry that went from here over to Foot of Liberty Street in Manhattan. On the Manhattan side, just about where the World Financial Center was, or is now, it was reading from the south to the north. Had the Jersey Central Ferry, the Pennsy Ferry, the New York Central's West Shore Ferry that went all the way up to Weehawken, the Lackawanna Ferry. And then at the foot of Chambers Street was the Erie Ferry. We missed the Erie facilities coming out, but we'll take a look at those later on. The Colgate plant, the remains of the Colgate clock down there, they had a huge plant making toothpaste and so forth. And they had a trackmobile, one of the early versions of the trackmobile. It was a powerful truck with couplings, and they used to switch cars through the street. A lot of trackage in the street. No, that's okay. I'll lean against you. Colgate plant occupied most of the waterfront at this point. Now you see a Circle Line boat coming out of a basin. That was the Morris Canal Basin. The Morris Canal started inland on that long inlet, and it went at tide level across Bayonne, across Jersey City and Bayonne. There was a tide lock, so that the canal level was always about mean tide, and when it was high tide, they'd have to lock the boats from the water down to the canal, and at low tide, they'd lock the boats up to the canal. Now on the south side of that inlet, the Lehigh Valley had a lot of lighterage piers, car float bridges, and so forth.
What?
And then you'll see the Jersey Central Terminal, which has been preserved as part of Gateway Park, and there's a lot of events in there. Actually, you get a pretty good view of the immigrant experience because they came up the harbor on the ships, saw the Statue of Liberty, were processed in Ellis Island, and 3/4 of the immigrants that did not settle in the New York area went out on the Jersey Central, the Reading, or the B&O. They all had train service coming in here. Trackway, they had a small turntable out at the end of the track. The buses were turned on the turntable and brought back so they could pick up in the passenger door. The right door was always on the right side of the platform. South of the Jersey Central Terminal was all of their coal docks, car float docks, and lighterage. Lighterage was very important because the on the Brooklyn side, in front of downtown Brooklyn, is where the New York dock facility was, and also the J Street connecting right behind the Green Ferry Terminal building. They were all industrial switching lines, mostly in the street, that served the industries in lower Brooklyn. Watchtower was one of the last shippers that got newsprint in by rail car. see some of the Morris Canal facilities later.
Car floats over here, remember?
Scrap yard next to that, a lot of export scrap. You'll see that pile, kind of a blackish or brownish looking pile. That's all scrap steel for export. And up ahead you'll see a crane gantry. That's Costco, China Ocean Shipping. And then there's one of the automobile ships unloading on here, which may be BMW. And they also do some exporting out through here on those same ships. American cars overseas, and overseas cars coming into America. Now, one of the values of car floating to a harbor like New York is that large pieces of material on 2 or more flat cars can be put on the car float. The Jersey side, where we've been traveling, will be the new Hudson Bergen light rail trolley line. It'll start at the Lackawanna Terminal, go down through Jersey City, and initially end up at East 34th Street in Bayonne, and ultimately going all the way around the Bayonne Peninsula. And who knows, in the future it might go over the Bayonne Bridge to service Staten Island. Anybody from away from this area, on a really nice day, a nice thing to do is to ride the Staten Island Ferry from the foot of Manhattan, Whitehall Street, over to St. George and back. It's free going over and only 50 cents coming back, and you get a great tour of the harbor, the statue, Robbins Reef, all the ships in Anchorage. It's really well worth it. For the camera folks, you get some really great photos from there too. They've got a dry dock up here, one of the ones that the ship goes in. You'll see the gate, which is like a canal lock gate. They fill it with water, bring a ship in, drain the water out, and then work on the bottom of the ship without having to raise it up. Here's a Navy or an Army transport sitting here. That's been there for quite a while. And again, this has been declared surplus, so it's some question what's going to happen, what will become of it. A lot of people have plans for it, a lot of people have ideas, but nothing's come to fruition at this point.
The Sailor's Snug Harbor. It was donated by a gentleman named, I think his first name was William Randall, back in the early 1800s for merchant marines to retire. It actually came into the city's jurisdiction in the early 1970s. But right now if you can see that plaque with the stone wall right below it, there's going to be a ferry built there. A ferry dock is being constructed this year, and it's attempting to get tourists from Manhattan to come out to Staten Island. They'll be docking at a ferry facility at that location, and then going up to the culture facility.
President's office, and he's really, and the captains had to bring these ever increasingly large ships in, openings, and the bridge towards the end, the bridge became more and more the target for ships, not on purpose, but it worked that way. And when the Aldine plan came in, they stopped running, well, it was after that they still had the Cranford on the behest of the shipping industry, because they had had a tremendous amount of problems getting through this bridge. The bridge was unique in as much as it was two parallel double-track trussels, and it had, each trussel had two draw spans under the west and the east channel. So you actually had four different draw spans over two channels, and they could open independently or together. And it was the site of the infamous Jersey Central drawbridge accident, which a lot of people still call the Snuffy Stonewise wreck, because he was killed on it. They waved at the towerman at FH down in Eastport, and the train continued out on the bridge and went through the open draw. Apparently the conductor, one of the crew in the coaches, found out what was going on and dumped the air, but it was too late. The engine and two coaches went in. One coach was hanging off, and the other two coaches up on the bridge. The depot was quite light because most of the people who rode the train worked in the bar. Oh, that's okay. No, that's all right. So you've got to... Over on the Elizabeth side, you'll see which would replicate the CNJ in Union County. It would start at Metropole, possibly a dogleg operation over to the IKEA store, which is about a half a mile inland. It would service the IKEA, Metro Mall. The Imperatori ferry people have been talking about putting in high-speed ferries from here to Lower Manhattan. The ferry would work with the train to feed it. There was a ferry operation from Elizabethport on Arthur Hill, but there was no decent upland parking area, and there was also no good transit access, so they never could get enough people to the ferry to make the operation pay. But with this operation, driven by the number of people going to the mall, and the rail passenger service, which would go inland through Elizabeth, Roselle Park, Cranford, Westfield, and on out to Plainfield, this would now give the type of passenger loading that would make the ferry work.
It's coming undone. That was coming undone.
I was just looking for that. You can see in the water on the Jersey side the abutments for the two trussels that were the Jersey Central main line. Operated trains from Jersey City to St. Louis, Chicago, and they had the Royal Blue to Washington, which a lot of people preferred to take. Although it was a slower train, it runs up the middle of the South Channel. Hence, this is known as Port Elizabeth, and the other is known as Port Newark. But it's all really the same whole port operation. The port side piggyback yard and double stack yard is inland about 3/4 Conrail, which is the old Jersey Central between Newark and Perth Amboy, and the New Jersey Turnpike and Newark Airport. Through a meadowland, and it has dropped most of its mud before it gets to the bay. But the Passaic River is the culprit as far as filling up the bay with muck. And of course, the water goes into the channels and makes... This gives you a close-up operation of what real intermodal is all about. the containers are taken off the ship, you'll see the chassis stacked up on their end, that fence, the picket fence looking thing. Chassis set up there, they bring them down, put the containers on, and either take them over the road inland, or they'll take them over to Portside or to the South Kearney Piggy Yard and load them on a railroad car for movement inland. But this is the part of the intermodal operation. There's another big mound of scrap over on the right-hand side or the starboard side for anybody who's more nautical. That's all for export scrap. This scrap comes in on Conrail. I'm about Cranford and take the old E train in from Cranford over the old E line, which runs over the Lehigh Valley. Whenever we see a general merchandise freight train, there's usually 10 or 20 cars of scrap on it heading into the port. It's all export. It's the largest tonnage export. Not dollar value, but tonnage. There's a heavy lift. Lamont Dougherty has an operation up on the Palisades right above the New Jersey state line where they monitor earthquakes worldwide. And this is their oceanography ship. Up ahead, we're getting to the end of the channel. You'll see some Conrail engines and standing cars. On the Conrail Bridge ahead of us was the original Pennsylvania Railroad Bridge, which was shared by the Lehigh Valley. Now, some of the main trains that go over this way go over into Jersey City, up the National Docks branch, and either through the Erie's old freight tunnel in Jersey City that comes out to Secaucus Croxton Yard, or they continue up the backside of Hoboken and through the Weehawken had projected a movement using the old Elizabethport trackage, bringing the passenger trains over this bridge, which hardly ever opens because it's upstream of the main port area, and then down the old Lehigh branch into Bayonne. Unfortunately, all of this happened before there was a commuter operating agency and any way to funnel the necessary funds into the new passenger operation. So that died of mourning.
Marty, he's waving to you.